Hi everyone, my name is Jeremiah Mikesuk. I'm one of your classmates in this course, and I'd like to talk to you some about my research that I've done into John chapter 13, verses 31 to 35. And this is where Jesus gives the apostles the new commandment to love one another as he first loved them. And as I began studying this passage, what I really wanted to find out, what I really wanted to discover, is the function of the term love in this passage. What is the apostle and Jesus by extension, of course, wanting us to understand through the repetition of this oh so pivotal term. And since my time is short, I want to go right to my conclusion, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how I arrived at the conclusion that I came to. And my conclusion is this: that in this passage, the term love is one that's intended to establish a group identification. More specifically, it's intended to identify the group of followers of Jesus who would later become known as Christians. But of course, at the time when this event occurred, that term really wasn't in use yet. So let me now that I've given you my conclusion that agapeo is intended to establish a group identification. Let me give you some info, some sort of perspective on how I arrived at this conclusion. What I tried to do was look at the context of the entire passage, not just verses 34 and 35, where a couple different renderings of the term love appear. Again, I tried to look at the whole passage, and I think what we see there is that there are um, in total, three patterns of identification that occur in this passage. The first pattern of identification occurs in verses 31 and 32. The main outcome of that identification is that Jesus, through the Greek verb for to be glorified, and I give more information about these terms in my handout. But in that first identification, Jesus is identified as not only the Son of God, but one who is co equally divine with God Himself. So, again, that's the first identification that occurs. The second identification that occurs is in the next verse, verse 35, 33, excuse me. And what we have there in verse 33 is Jesus directly addressing the apostles. And he addresses them through the Greek term um, teknion. And in the Greek language, the term teknion really meant little children or dear little children. So he's establishing a relationship and identity with the apostles. At that moment, it's no longer just one of student teacher, although that dynamic is still present. But in the moment of this verse, it's almost one of father to child, because again, he refers to them as dear little children, I think is the proper rendering in this context of that term. And then in verses 34 and 35, this is where we come to the new commandment to love, for the apostles to love one another as Jesus first loved them. Now, in kind of localizing, again, what is the function of love here? There are a couple of things to consider. First, the word love, what does it mean in the Greek language? And here, John, as the transmitter of this information, uses the term agapeo. And it's a favored word for love for John. He uses others. But agapeo, at its core, refers to a very humble, a very self-sacrificing form of love. A good demonstration of this occurred earlier in the same chapter in John's Gospel when Jesus washed the feet of the apostles. Again, same word, same manifestation of love. The other thing to consider, though, is the outcome of this love that's expressed in 34 and 35. What happens as a result of that? It's not that that expression of love will automatically trigger some sort of epiphany in the witnesses of the love to the point that they will automatically become converted and know Jesus as the Messiah. What the text tells us is they they, and by broadly speaking, they can be broken down into two terms: the world at large and Jews collectively. That they will know that the apostles are followers of Jesus. Now, there are some evangelistic consequences that would certainly come out of these expressions of love. But what I want everyone to understand is that fundamentally in this passage, the function of love, again, is to establish the identity of the apostles as followers of Christ. And certainly, I realize that this is a very brief presentation, but I look forward to interacting with all of you in the discussion boards. And if you have further questions for me about how I arrived at this conclusion, please do not hesitate to ask. Take care, folks. Have a good rest of the semester. Bye.